Math. When you need help, you use Minute Math.
I'm Sean Gannon, and this is Minute Math, and today we're learning about adding and subtracting fractions and mixed numbers. And we're going to evaluate each expression. 5 over 4 minus 3 over 4. Okay, so we have 5 over 4 minus 3 over 4. Well, since these fractions have the same base, we keep the base the same, and we then can just worry about the numerator, right? So the denominator, again, the base is the same, denominator is the same. So we worry about the numerator and keep the bottom the same. So 4 is still on our denominator. 5 minus 3, we just look across the top. 5 minus 3 is 2. So we have 2/4 here. Now, 2/4 we can simplify. We can break down that fraction. Break it down, simplify it really. 2/4 simplifies to be 1/2. Okay, and so 1/2 is just our final answer. So quick recap, we're given 5/4 minus 3/4. Well, since these have the same denominator, we just look at the numerator. We subtract the numerator, got a 2, kept the same denominator, 4. Then 2 over 4 simplified to be 1/2. So again, our final answer here is just 1/2. Hi, I'm Sean Gannon, and this is Minute Math. Today we're learning about add and subtracting fractions and mixed numbers, and we'll evaluate each expression. So, if I was given these fractions, 3/2 minus 1/2, okay? Well, 3/2, 1/2, they both have the same denominator, which is 2. Since we have that, we just have to worry about the numerator, 3 minus 1. Okay, so 2, the denominator stays the same. 3 minus 1 is just 2. And now we have 2 over 2. Okay, well, 2 over 2 simplifies to be 1. Any number divided by itself is just 1. So there we have a final answer of just 1. 2/5 plus 4/5. Okay, well, since the denominator is the same for both of these, right? Denominator is the same. That means we can keep that the same on our next step. Okay, 5. Now we just have to worry about adding the numerator. Well, 2 plus 4, right? 2 plus 4 is 6. And so now we just have a 6/5 here. And that's it. That's all we're going to simplify here. We just have 6/5. There's nothing we can break it down. So 6/5 is our final answer. 1/3 minus 1/3. So I have 1/3 minus 1/3. Well, this one's fairly simple, right? 1/3 and 1/3, they're both the same value, right? 1/3 minus 1/3. So anything subtracted by itself is just 0, right? They cancel each other out. So our final answer here is just 0. 6 minus 1/6. Now, the key here, the trick part is we can only combine these numbers if they have the same base with subtraction, right? So 6 has really a base of 1. 6 over 1 is just 6. So we have 6 over 1 minus 1/6. Well, to get 6 over 1 to have the same base as this 1 over 6, I'm going to multiply this by 6 over 6. Okay? And 6 over 6 is essentially the number 1, and it doesn't really change anything. But what it does do is it adapts 6 over 1 to be, well, 6 times 6 is 36. 6 times 1 is just 1. Okay. Oh, sorry. It's 6. Can't I multiply? I don't think so. 6 there. That's the whole point. We bring down this 1/6 right here, and now we're subtracting, right? They have the same base. That was our goal. So we just subtract the numerator. 36 minus 1 is 35. So we have 35 over 6, and there we have our final answer. 1/2 minus 1/2. All right, so we have 1/2 minus 1/2 here. Well, we have a number 1/2 minus itself 1/2. Whenever that happens, that always comes out to be 0. They cancel each other out. So 0 is just my final answer. 1/5 plus 1/5. Okay? Well, one thing here is they both have the same base. Since they have the same base, right, that denominator, we can leave that our next step down here, and all we have to do is add the numerator. So 1 plus 1 is 2. 5 stays in our base, so our final answer here, because this can't be simplified, is just 2 over 5, or 2/5. 7/6 minus 5/6, or 5/6, right? Alright, 7/6 minus 5/6. Okay, well, they have the same base. Since they have the same base, alright, same denominator, that just comes down, and all we do is subtract the numerators. Well, 7 minus 5 is just 2. So now we have 2/6. Okay, well, 2/6 right here, that can be simplified. Both are divisible by 2. Alright, so 2 divided by 2 is 1. So we have 1 up top in the numerator, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. So we have 1/3. And that's simplified all the way, so our final answer here is just 1/3. Negative 4/5 minus 7/8. So one of the first things you're going to notice here is that these do not have the same base. So we need to convert them to have the same base. So to do that, what I like to do is just take the base right here, this 5, right, and multiply the second number by 5 over 5. Then I take this base, which is the 8, and multiply the first number by that number over itself, 8 over 8. Okay, this will always ensure that you will have the same denominator, okay, when this is done. Okay, so let's go do that. 8 times negative 4 is a negative 32. Okay, and 8 times 5 is 40. Okay, now we have the right side. For our subtraction here, 5 times 7 is 35, and 8 times 5 is 40. So now we have the same base. We can worry about the numerators, right? Now, this subtraction is like plus a negative, right? Okay. So our base is 40 here. Let's go add our numerators. Well, they're both negative, but when we add those two negatives, it's even more negative. Negative 32 plus a negative 35 is a negative 67. So we have negative 67 here, and I believe that can't be simplified. That is correct. So our final answer here is just a negative 67 over 40. 1/3 minus a negative 5/3. Okay, so we have 1/3 minus a negative 5/3. Okay, well, one thing we see is subtracting a negative, same thing as adding a positive. So let's go do that. We have 1/3 plus a positive 5/3. Okay, and that's plus a. Let's go make that a little nicer there looking, instead of a swirl. Plus a positive. Okay, all right. So now that they have the same base here, right, since 1/3 and 5/3 have the same base of 3, we can keep that base there, and we just have to add the numerator. Well, 1 plus 5 is 6, right? So we have 6/3. Well, 6/3 can be simplified, right? 6 divided by 3 is just 2. Right? 6/3 simplifies to be 2. So our final answer here is just good old 2. Negative 1/3 plus 3/8. So we have negative 1/3 plus 3/8. Well, the first thing you should see here is that these do not have the same base. Okay, so we can't add them directly right now, but we can make them have the same base. And my little technique for this is I just take the base here, the first base, and the denominator, the first number, and multiply that over itself to the second number. Then I take the second number, which in that base is 8, and multiply the first number by that number over itself. We all know that a number divided by itself is the same thing as 1, so we really don't change this problem at all. It's just the way it looks. So now let's simplify. 8 times negative 1 is a negative 8, and 8 times 3 is 24. Plus 3 times 3 is 9, and 8 times 3 is 24 as well. This always gives you the same base, which we need to add these two numbers together. Now, bases are the same. That was the whole point of that, right? So 24 stays there. Now we just add the numerators. Negative 8 plus 9 is a positive 1. So we have 1 right there. So now we just have 1 over 24. That is already simplified, so that is our final answer. Negative 10 over 7 plus 1 over 6. Now the first thing I see here is these two numbers don't have the same base. Okay, so we can't add them directly. But we can make them have the same base, then we can add them. right? So to do that, I take the first denominator and multiply that over itself for the second number. Then I take the second denominator, which is 6 here, and multiply that by the first number, but that same denominator over itself, 6 over 6, okay? This will always ensure that our base becomes really the multiplication of our two bases when we're done. 6 times negative 10 is negative 60, and 6 times 7 is 42. We add here 7 times 1 is just 7, and 6 times 7 again is 42. So now that we have the same base, we can combine these two numbers and keep the base the same, okay, always 42, and look at the numerator. Well, negative 60 plus 7 is just negative 53, and so our final answer here is just negative 53 over 42. 9/5 plus a negative 4/3. Okay? So we have 9/5 plus a negative 4/3. Well, these numbers don't have the same base, so I can't add them directly. Okay? So what I can do is take the base of the first number and multiply that over itself to the second number. Okay? Then we take the second number's base, 3, and multiply that by the first number again over itself. 3 over 3 and 5 over 5 are both 1, so we do not change our problem really here, right? This will ensure we get the same base, allowing us to add these numbers together, right? So let's go simplify. 3 times 9 is 27, and 3 times 5 is 15. Second number here, negative 4 times 5 is 20, but it's negative, right? Negative 20, and 3 times 5 is 15. So now we need to simplify. Well, we have the same base, which is 15. Fantastic, right here. So 15. All right, now we look at the numerator. 27 plus a negative 20 is just a positive 7. So we have 7/15. That cannot be simplified anymore. So our final answer here is just 7 over 15. 2 minus 13 over 8. Okay. Well, the main thing here is we need to have the same base, all right? Same base to add these numbers. 2 does not really have the same base as 13 over 8, right? But we know 2 has the same thing as like 2 over 1, right? 2 over 1 is the same thing as 2. And that can help us here. So to get the same base, all you have to do here, since we have 1 in this base, is I'm going to multiply this 2 by 8 over 8. Because I know 8 times 1 will give me 8, which will make the base the same. And I put 8 up top, right? Because 8 over 8 is just the number 1, and 1 times 2 is just itself, so we're not changing, all right? So now let's simplify this. 8 times 2, okay, is 16, and 8 times 1 is 8. So we have 16 over 8 minus 13 over 8, okay? So now we have to just simplify. Excuse me, this. All right, same base as 8, so 16 minus 13 is just 3. Okay, 3. And keep the base the same, 8. And so our final answer is just 3/8. 9 over 5 minus 5 over 8. So 9/5 minus 5/8. Okay? Well, what I want to do is take the denominator here, the 5, and multiply the second number by 5 over 5. And then the 8 here, this denominator, multiply the first number by 8 over 8. And what this does, this will allow us to have a common denominator, 8 times 5, which then allows us to add or subtract this fraction. So, subtraction sign there. Let's go to the left. 8 times 9 is 72. And 8 times 5 is 14. Now to the right, 5 times 5, multiply across. 5 times 5 is 25. And 8 times 5 is 40. Okay? So now, we have 72 over 40 minus 25 over 40. Well, they have the same base. Since they have the same base, we just have to worry about subtracting the numerator. So, 72 minus 25, well, that gives us, I believe it's 47, but let's quickly, 72 minus 25 here. Carry the 1, 5, 7, that's 47, yep, we have 47. So we have 47 up top, and the denominator is just 40, and so our final answer here is just 47 over 40. Negative 4/3 minus a negative 3/2. So we have negative 4/3 minus a negative 3/2. Okay. Well, a few things I want to do is I see we have subtracting a negative. Okay. I know it's adding a positive, so I'm going to adapt that in a second. But I want to make sure we also have the same base. Okay. Same denominator. So I'm going to take this 3 and multiply that to the second number and put 3 over itself. So that's just a 1. Then I take this 2 and put 2 over 2. And what that's going to do, allow me to have the same denominator base so we can add or subtract this fraction. So 2 times negative 4 was a negative 8. And 2 times 3 is 6. Now we're subtracting a negative, which is the same thing as adding a positive. So let's do that plus a positive. 3 times 3 was 9, or is 9, and 3 times 2 is 6. So now we have negative 8 over 6 plus a positive 9 over 6. Well, they have the same base now, which they're supposed to, right, by our little trick here. And so we just worry about the numerator. Negative 8 plus 9 is a positive 1, so we have 1 over, and then 6 right here. And so our final answer is just 1/6. Negative 1 plus a negative 2 and 2/5. Okay? So negative 1 plus a negative 2 and 2/5. So since these are both negative, we know we're going to a more negative number. Now, here, all right, we have the whole number and then the fraction part, right? Okay, and so we have negative 2 and 2/5. Okay, so that's almost like negative 2 plus 2/5, right? That's really kind of what it is. But since we have our whole numbers here, what we can do is actually quickly add these two together, right? If you think of it like as, I don't know, negative 2.4 plus a negative 1 is negative 3.4, right? So that's really what we're going to do here. We're going to combine the negative 1 and the negative 2 to be a negative 3 and keep the 2/5 in there. And so that's all we have. Our final answer is negative 3 and 2/5. Negative 3 and 3/5 minus 4 and 2/5. Okay? All right. Well, since we see the minus 4 and 2/5 is subtracting sign, and the first number is negative as well, we're adding basically two negative numbers. So I'm gonna rewrite this with that plus and negative. Negative 3 and 3/5 plus a negative 4 and 2/5. Okay. Well, since we're dealing all with negatives here, okay, and we have a mixed fraction here, what we can do is separate this up in a sense, okay? And so we have negative 3 plus a negative 3/5 plus a negative 4 plus a negative 2/5. So we can kind of break that down like that. And what that allows us to do is really see what's going on here. Negative 3 and negative 4 together, right? We can add these two together right here, and that becomes a negative 7. Right? And then we can add the negative 3/5 and negative 2/5 together, and that we can kind of group them together, and that becomes that's a negative 1, same denominator. We add the numerators, it's negative 5 over 5, right? So negative 5 over 5, we know, is a negative 1. So negative 7 plus a negative 5 over 5, or a negative 1, is a negative 8. And so our final answer here is just negative 8. 3 and 6/7 plus a negative 1, I'll make a big one there, and 1/7. Okay? Well, what we can do here, okay, is kind of combine the whole number parts and the fraction parts. Now, when we do that, we make sure this negative gets distributed also to the fraction. So sometimes I like to write it like this. 3 and 6/7 is the same thing as 3 plus 6/7. And then we have plus here and negative 1, but make sure that negative plus a negative 1/7 goes to that fraction. Okay? Negative 1 and 1/7 is the same thing as negative 1 plus a negative 1/7. Now let's go pair kind of like numbers or whole numbers. So 3 and negative 1 come out to be a positive 2, and 6/7 and a negative 1/7 is plus 5/7. All right? So we have 5/7 right there. Okay? So now you can combine these two together, add them together, and just make it 2 and 5/7. And there we have our final answer. 1 and 2/7 plus a negative 3 and 4/7. Okay? Well, first thing I like to do is I like to break up these mixed numbers, right, into be whole numbers and proper fractions. So to do that, I take the 1 and 2/7, make it 1 plus a 2/7. Then plus a negative 3 plus, make sure we bring the negative, negative 4/7. Okay? And now what I'm going to do is add the whole numbers as well as the proper fractions. So 1 and 3, or negative 3 is a negative 2. Okay, plus here 2/7 and negative 4/7 is a negative, right? Negative 2/7. Okay, when we add these two together, okay, the denominator is the same, so we just worry about the numerator. Okay, so we have negative 2 plus a negative 2/7. Since they're both negative here, that's good, makes it easier. So our final answer, we just combine them together, is a negative 2 and 2/7. 2 and 1/3 plus a negative 1 and 2/3. Okay? So we have 2 and 1/3 plus a negative 1 and 2/3. All right? So what I'm going to do here, I like to break this up to be a whole number and a proper fraction. So we have 2 plus 1/3 plus a negative 1 plus a negative 2/3. Make sure the negatives go to both parts there. Now we are going to add our whole numbers. So 2 and negative 1 is a positive 1, and 1/3 and a negative 2/3. Okay, that comes out to be, well, 1 plus, the denominator is the same, so the numerator, 1 plus a negative 2 is a negative 1. So we plus a negative 1/3 here. Okay, so now we have a positive and we have a negative number. We add them together. Okay, same thing as subtraction. Okay, adding a negative. We know 1 is the same thing as 3/3, right? So we have 3/3 minus 1/3. Well, denominator again is the same. So 3 minus 1 is 2. So we have 2/3. And it's positive, and that's our final answer. Negative 1 and 3/4 plus a negative 3 and 3/4. Okay? So negative 1 and 3/4 plus a negative 3 and 3/4. All right? So I'm going to break these mixed fractions down into a whole number and proper fraction. So negative 1 plus a negative 3/4, then plus a negative 3 plus a negative 3/4 as well. Now make sure you are making the negative goes to both parts, the whole number and the fraction. All right. So now let's combine our whole numbers. Negative 1 and negative 3 come out to be a negative 4. Okay. Then negative 3/4 and negative 3/4, right? The denominator is the same. So we have 4 down here. We add the numerator. Negative 3 and negative 3 is a negative 6. Okay? And sorry if the camera's shaking. My cat our wife's cat is hitting the stand. Anyway, so negative 4 plus the negative 6/4. Okay. So now we can combine these two together, but first, I don't like this negative 6/4. I need to make that a proper fraction. Okay, so negative 6/4, okay, is the same thing. All right, so when negative 4 comes down, same thing if we break it down. All right, as a negative 1 and 2/4. Okay, if you need help, there's places where you can find, or we're not going to go over how to break the proper fraction or improper to a proper fraction, but we have negative 1 and 2/4 right here, or plus a negative 2/4 to be more accurate there, right? So we kind of break that down. Now the negative 1 and negative 4 is a negative 5, okay? And then we have plus a negative 2/4 over here, okay? Well, negative 2/4 can simplify to be negative 1/2, okay? And we can bring it together. So our final answer is negative 5 and 1/2. Negative 1 and 7/8 plus a negative 3 and 1/2. Okay? Well, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to break this down to be a mixed number, to be whole number, and proper fraction. Okay? So we have a negative 1 plus a negative 7/8 right there. Okay? Make sure we bring the negative over. Then plus a negative 3 plus a negative 1/2. Okay? So what I'm going to do now, once I broke it up, I'm going to add my whole numbers, but I can't directly add these fractions, okay? So we're going to have to break those down and figure out what they have to be. So -1 and -3 is a -4, but what I'm going to do here on the side is a -7/8 plus a -1/2, okay? Well, we need to have the same base. So I know that -1/2 is the same thing as -4/8, and that's going to have the same base. And essentially what I'm doing is multiplying this by 4 over 4, trying to get that denominator there. So -7/8 plus a -4/8, okay? That comes out to be, well, we add our negatives here. We add our negative, or keep the denominator same, add the numerator. -7 plus a -4 is a -11. So we're -11/8 here, okay? Now, since that's an improper fraction, we want to make it a proper fraction. So that's the same thing. We'll kind of break it down. 8 goes into 11 one time, so we have a -1 there. Okay, and then what was left over would be 3. So we have plus a -3/8. So -11/8 is the same thing as -1 plus a -3/8. That I bring over here, plus a -1 plus a -3/8. Okay. Well, the -4 that we found plus the -1 is a -5. And then we can bring down the -3/8 here. Now we can combine these two, combine them, right, to be one fraction. So we have -5 and 3/8 here. And there we have our final answer. -2 and 7/8 plus a -1 and 1/2. Okay. Well, first thing I like to do is break down this mixed fraction to be a whole number and a proper fraction. So we have -2 plus a -7/8 here. Then plus a -1 plus a -1/2. Okay. Now I'm going to add now my whole numbers and my fractions. Well, -2 and -1 is a -3. But my fractions, when I add them together, I'm going to do that over here to show how they can be combined. So let's take a few steps here. -7/8 plus a -1/2. All right. Well, what I want to do is I can't add these until the denominators are the same. So we have an 8 here and a 2 here, okay, in the denominator. Well, 2 can get to 8 by being multiplied by 4. So I have 4 over 4 right there. Now when I multiply this out, so -7/8 comes down here, and plus -4 times -1 times 4 is a -4, and 2 times 8 is 8. Okay. Now we have the same base, same denominator, so we can add the numerator. -4 plus -7 plus -4 is a -11/8. Okay, so we have -11/8, and now if we want to write that as a proper fraction here, okay, or a whole number, right, or a mixed number. Excuse me, I was getting my words mixed up there. We have a -1 plus, right, and there's 3 left over because 8 goes into 11, plus 3 more gives me, or 8 plus 3 gives me 11, so we have a -3/8 there. So now I'm going to bring that over here, plus a -1 plus a -3/8. Okay, now let's combine the whole numbers again. We have -4 plus a -3/8. All right, and now we can bring that together to be one whole number. All right, one mixed fraction here, which is -4 and 3/8. -2 and 5/6 minus a -1 and 1/4. Okay. Well, what I'm going to do here and break this down to be a whole number and a fraction. So we have -2 plus a -5/6. And instead of subtracting a negative, same thing as adding a positive, we just have +1 and then plus the 1/4. Okay. So now we're going to add our whole numbers and our proper fractions. Whole numbers, -2 and -1 is a -1. And -5/6 and 1/4 need some more work. So we're going to put a little note over here. We have -5/6 plus 1/4. All right. Now, to add these two, they have to have the same denominator. So to do that, I multiply the right side by 6/6 and the left side by 4/4. getting from the opposite base. What that allows me to have now is the same denominator. Alright, so the numerator, 4 times negative 5 is a negative 20, and 4 times 6 is 24. Okay? Plus 1 times 6 is 6, and 4 times 6 again is 24. So now when we add these two numbers together, we keep the denominator the same, 24, and the numerator, well, negative 20 plus a 6 is a negative, okay, that's a negative 14. Okay, now both of these numbers are divisible by 2. Okay, so negative 14 divided by 2 is the negative 7, and 24 divided by 2 is 12, and we cannot break this down anymore. So now I bring that over here as these two numbers being added together. We have negative 7 over 12. So negative 1 plus a negative 7/12 is a negative 1 and 7/12. So we have negative 1 and 7/12 here. And so there we have our final answer. Negative 3 and 5/8 minus 4 and 2/5. Okay? So first thing I want to do is break this down, all right, to have our whole numbers and our fractions for each one. So we have negative 3 plus a negative 5/8. And then subtracting, the same thing as adding a negative, plus a negative 4 plus a negative 2/5. Make sure you bring the negative to both parts. So now we're going to add our whole numbers. Negative 4 and negative 3 is a negative 7. But our fractions, I'm going to do that work over here. All right, so we can't add them directly. Negative 5/8 plus a negative 2/5. Well, they have to have the same denominator to add them. So what I'm going to do is multiply the second number by 8 over 8, which comes from this denominator, and the first number by 5 over 5, which comes from this denominator here. All right, multiplying them across, 5 times negative 5 is negative 25, and 5 times 8 is 40. Then negative 2 times 8 is negative 16, and 5 times 8 is 40 again. So now we have the same base, we just add the numerators here, okay? And so we have negative 25 plus negative 16. Well, negative 25 is negative 16. Well, 1 plus 2 is 3, right? So we have 30, and then the 5 and 6 is 11, so 30 and 11, all right, come out to be negative 41. So you have negative 41 right here over 40, okay? And if I want to write that, break that down, right, to be a whole number and a fraction, that would be negative 1 plus a negative 1 over 40, right? Because 40 goes into 41 one time, boom, and we're left with 1 left over, 1 over 40. And they're all negative, okay? Bring that over here, plus a negative 1, plus a negative 1 over 40. All right. So now we have negative 7 plus a negative 1, which is a negative 8, okay? And then we bring down a negative 1 over 40, plus a negative 1 over 40, right there, okay? And now, combine these two, they're both negative, so we can write it as one number easily, negative 8 and 1 over 40. And that's our final answer. 1 and 2/5 minus a negative 3 and 3/4. Okay? Well, one thing I like to do here is I break this down, this mixed fraction, to be a whole number and a proper fraction. So 1 plus 2/5 here. Now, subtracting a negative is the same thing as adding a positive, so we have plus 3 plus 3/4. Okay? And now we're at our whole numbers and fractions. 1 plus 3 is 4, but then 2/5 and 3/4 I'm going to do over here. It takes a little more work. 2/5 plus 3/4. All right. So now, they don't have the same base. So what I can do is take this base, 5, and multiply the second number by 5 over 5, and then this 4, multiply the first number by 4 over 4. This will always ensure we have the same base and denominator. All right? 4 times 2 is 8, and 4 times 5 is 20. 3 times 5 is 15, and 4 times 5 again is 20. Again, we got the same base. That's what we want. Now, since we have the same denominator, we add the numerator. 8 plus 15, and it comes out to be what is it, 23? Right? Yeah, 23. So there's 23 here over 20. Okay? Keep the same. Now, since this is a improper fraction, I'm going to break it to a mixed fraction there. And break it up to 2 parts. 20 goes in 23 one time with 3 left over. So 3 over 20 is, what's left. Now, I'm going to bring that over here. I have plus 1 plus 3 over 20. Okay? And so we add our whole numbers. 4 plus 1 is a 5. And we have 3 over 20 right there. Okay? Now we can combine these two together to get our final answer, just one mixed fraction. 5 and 3 over 20. 2 and 4/5 minus 5/8. Okay? Well, the first thing I want to do is when I add these together, subtract it, I'm going to break this mixed fraction to be a whole number and a proper fraction. So we have 2 plus 4/5 minus 5/8. Okay? So now all we can do, or have to do first or next, is add these fractions together. So to do that, we have to make them into a, we'll have the same base. Okay? So I'm going to kind of show that work over here. I have 4/5 minus 5/8. Okay? And to do that, I'm going to take this number right here, this base, and multiply that over itself to the second number, and this base, the denominator, same thing as the first number, 8 over 8. Okay? That will always ensure that we have the same denominator. Okay? So 8 times 4, let's multiply that, is 32. And 8 times 5 is 40. Then we subtract here, 5 times 5 is 25. And 8 times 5 is 40. So now we have 32 over 40 minus 25 over 40. Base is the same, so we worry about the numerator. 32 minus 25 comes out to be a 7. And 40s are just the same down there. So now we have 7 over 40. We can bring that over here, because that's what is combining these two together. And we have 7 over 40. Now I'm going to bring down the 2. And 2 plus 7 over 40 is just 2 and 7, 40. Okay? And that's our final answer, 2 and 7 over 40.
Minute Math. When you need help, you use Minute Math. Minute Math. Minute Math. When you need help, you use Minute Math. MinuteMathTutor.com.